Gosh, where do I start? She is a woman on fire right there. I got the pleasure to meet Cindy, and I didn't know what to expect. And she's the kind of person at Cisco, and I have this vision of what Cisco executives are like. I'll let you imagine what that might be. And when I met Cindy, I'm like, wow, she's got a personality. She's really nice. She's thoughtful. She's mindful. She knows what she's talking about. This is unreal, right? This is definitely unusual. And in the conversation, she started pushing a little bit. And I remember she's like, Stacy, we want to do some Agile training, but it's got to be 100% remote. I'm like, well, what do you mean? It's a 100% distributed team. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm an Agile coach and in Agile and training, yeah, I don't know how we're going to do this. And she kept pushing. And she's like, just kind of think about what you could do. And she helped push me in a certain direction that I wasn't comfortable in going as an Agile coach. Because I'm thinking, I got to have co-located teams. It's a must. I read it in some book somewhere. And you guys know the book. And then I started engaging with, well, what could it look like? What are the possibilities? And Cindy helped introduce me to that uncomfortable zone that Agile coaches like you, like me, need to be pushed sometimes. And for that, I'm very grateful for Cindy for doing that. And she's just got some really creative ideas. I do know that I was in a situation where I could hear some of her staff talk about her, and they said, gosh, she's really changed how we're engaged with one another, and she's really taken her team to a new level. So she's got great stories, but for her to share them with you. So with that, Cindy.
Thanks. So this is a bit intimidating. I'm here to talk about my team's Agile transformation, and you're all, I think a lot of you are Agile experts, and I am definitely not. So I rely on Stacy for a lot of that, but I wanted to share with you today a little bit of the story of our team's Agile journey and why we decided to go down this path. So I'll start just telling you a little bit about, just a tiny bit about myself. So most of you are probably software people. No, Agile. I'm a hardware person, right? So I used to implement routers and switches, IP telephony and security and wireless. And then I went into systems engineering. So systems engineering at Cisco means sales engineering. So I'm in sales. So yeah, I'm one of those people that overcommits. So actually, the engineers, we try to hold the salespeople back. So I did want to throw up a bit of an org chart. Absolutely despise org charts, but I wanted to kind of give you a perspective of my team. So at Cisco, we have about 17,000 salespeople. Yesterday, I heard the number 20,000. I don't know. Cisco's about 71,000 people, somewhere in there. So we've got a really big sales force. It's very much a sales-oriented company. And so with about 6,000 engineers, I know that number because I'm responsible for that number. So my boss, Mike Coons, reports to Chris Dedicoat up there, so VP of Executive Vice President, because apparently now they have multiple levels of Vice President, Executive Vice President of Sales. So we have a small team of about 20 people under Mike. And these people are responsible for the productivity, the care and feeding of 6,000 systems engineers. Now, all 6,000 of those systems engineers are in this big box, and then our team is in the little tiny box, and it's a matrix organization. So if you're familiar with matrix, it's all leading through influence. So that's kind of how the team looks. So in April of last year, so April of 2015, there was a position open for Director of Strategy and Operations under Mike. And I am one of those people that always wants to see improvement. I'm a continuous improvement person. So it seemed to me that if I went and worked at the global level, I'd have the most opportunity to make change. And there's several changes that I'm pretty passionate about making at Cisco. So I decided to go for the role. But before I did that, I met with Mike in his office before I applied for the job. And I said, Mike, I just want you to know I'm a change agent. I'm a challenger, and I will challenge you. I will challenge your decisions. I will do it in private, and whatever agreement we come to, that is the public opinion. I will always back you in public, but in private, I need to challenge you, and if you don't want that, then I'm not the right person for the job. And so he said, yes, I want you to challenge you. And we put that to the test pretty often early on. And we had some bumps in the road, but we eventually got there. But that's one of the things that I heard earlier in a meeting, folks talking about, how do I work with my management when I want to implement these new types of ideas. I just took the very straightforward approach of, hey, I want to change things. If you don't want me to change things, you don't want me. So that's kind of the approach that I took. So in the interview process, I said, okay, at Cisco, you go through, it's like 12 people for any job. It takes months in any other company. You also have to essentially interview on a platform. So what I did is I went and I interviewed all the SE vice presidents for each one of these little groups. They're really big groups. And said, hey, what do you think of this worldwide systems engineering team? And here's what they told me. They said they take a problem, and they go back into a hole for 9 months, and at the end of the time, they present us with a solution to a problem we've already addressed, and it didn't actually solve the problem to begin with in the first place. Oh, that's really interesting. This one was just really struck me. They provide little value, and then a couple of them said, I'm not exactly sure what they do, and they're dependent upon a lot of these things that this group does. Now, I've had the opportunity while working at Cisco to work with a lot of the people on this team, and they're very, very smart people. They're very capable people. And so when I heard this feedback, I was shocked. I mean, how could they be saying these things about these people? The other thing that was interesting, they handed over a deck. Here's our strategy for this team. And they had 30 projects for these 20 people. I was shocked. So I interviewed on a platform, of reducing projects, but also trying to find a way to fix these issues. Now, at the same time that I'm doing these interviews, I happen to be reading a book. So at Cisco, we're doing an Agile. We do Agile. We've been doing Agile for a long time, actually, but it's come and gone. And but I heard there's much louder noise around Agile at Cisco, and so I was trying to figure out what this Agile thing was. I'm a salesperson or a sales engineer, and I came across this book, and so I'm hearing. They go back into a black hole, it takes 9 months, and they deliver something that doesn't solve our problem. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're doing waterfall development and for project management. And it's not even a software tool, right? It's just a program or some sort of an initiative. So now, I didn't think that reading a book made me an expert in it, but I thought, with all new ideas, you got to start somewhere. So this is actually one of the slides from my presentation, my platform that I did. And I said, hey, we need to change the way this team works. There's this thing called Agile. I don't claim to be an expert, but there's this thing called Agile. I think we ought to embrace it. We should change the way the team works. And also significantly cut the number of programs that the teams are running. Now, I put this little thing in red over here, transition to an operational team. So I had this other idea that this small team would be incubators, right? They would create new innovative things for the organization and turn it over to other folks that know how to run things long term. There are lots and lots of teams at Cisco and in any other company that operationalize things, right? They don't have to move as fast. So our team is dedicated to finding solutions, getting to minimum viable product. We also practice a lot of lean techniques, getting to minimum viable product and then finding a team to hand it off to. And we coach them through the change, but they maintain them because we have a lot of teams that are really good at maintaining. So not a lot of good teams that are good at innovating. So that's kind of the overall platform that I interviewed on. I got the job, and what I discovered is there are 20 people in at least 50 projects. The 30 were the ones that they had on a PowerPoint slide, and there actually are more than 50. And this is where the team is located. There aren't 20 dots on here, but we're located all over the world. We've got a couple of developers, contract developers in New Zealand, because we do own a couple of tools that I'm actually trying to get rid of or move off to another team so we can build new tools to give to other teams. But our team is very geographically dispersed. And so because I'm not an expert in Agile and I do know my own limitations, we hired Stacy to come help us learn how to implement Agile. And he was very reluctant at first when he saw that we were distributed, right? But so my husband will tell you this: if you ever want to get me to do something, tell me I can't. I forbid no, I can't do that, no. So my first husband told me he didn't think I could get my CCIE, so I divorced him and got my CCIE. So that's a little, just so you know, that's how you push my buttons. So So Stacy's like, I don't think we can do this. Yes, we can do this. We'll find a way. We'll find a way. And here's the thing, especially with Agile, right? It happens in small chunks. So if you screw it up, this is one of the things Stacy told me. If you screw it up, you screwed up a very small portion of it, you can try again and try again and try again. And that's a lot of what we do. We make mistakes. So I'm going to talk about some of those mistakes. So this is my team. And when I took over the team, the former leader of the team had a very, very different style than I did. He was very command and control. And the communication path had to go through him. I'd never seen anything like it. It's exactly what I anticipate the military having been like, as kind of what I think we heard this morning, is that you couldn't talk to my boss, the VP, without passing through the director before me. And that is not who I am or the team that I want to build. So Agile was actually kind of a way for me to break down a lot of that hierarchy and move it aside. And it actually was that facilitator for me to say, hey, we're going to do things differently and open the doors to direct communications to the team. So I am kind of a fan of creating a couple of rules or guidelines on our team. Any project, we give ourselves a couple of boundaries just to make sure that we are operating within the spirit of that. But one of the rules that I have for my team is video is mandatory. Now, I mention this because Agile requires a great deal of trust. And I don't believe that you can really learn to trust somebody until you look them in the eye. I'm a huge believer in video. I talk with people in video every day. When I tell my kids I go to work, I'm dressed from here up every day when I go to work. But it's really powerful. A couple jobs ago, I was talking with a manager. We had a regularly scheduled one-on-one. Video pops up, and she just looks horrible. And when you can see that happen, you can stop the conversation and say, hey, we need to talk about what's going on. You got to tell me, because otherwise, if it had just been an audio conference, I would have just barreled right through and gone into our one-on-one and not known. But video is an incredibly powerful tool, and you'll find that a lot of our team have never met each other in person, but when they meet each other in person, they actually don't know that they haven't met each other. It's just like they've met each other. And we're working on virtual beers. We're still virtual beers. I have a couple of girlfriends at Cisco. We do virtual wine, but it's not the same. And so the other thing that made it work was tools, and I'm showing you the Cisco tools. You do not need Cisco tools. I'm just doing these because we're Cisco. We'd use Cisco tools, but it did really require web collaboration and persistent chat. Now, so for persistent chat, you've got Slack. We heard about Slack this morning. You've got Microsoft has Skype. Is it Skype now? It used to be something else before. Yeah, before Skype. Yeah, Skype. And then you've got so you've got a lot of these out there, but we live in these rooms. This is how we collaborate across multiple time zones. So we also, we have some expectations set up that, hey, if something's urgent, here's how I'm going to communicate it to you. But if we need to communicate, we can do so asynchronously in one of these chat rooms so that we're not constantly stomping at each other's personal time. And so that's how we do it. And this is actually a screenshot of one of the chat rooms we were in when we did the immersion training. So these things were critical for us to actually build the environment that we needed to be successful with Agile. And I'm not going to go through all the details of rolling out Agile because you guys are much more knowledgeable in it than I am. So what I thought I'd do is I'd give you kind of the high-level overview of how we did it, what worked, what didn't work, and then a couple of pieces of advice I have for you from the sales team's perspective. And then my goal is to leave you with time for questions. So I mentioned we engaged an Agile coach. There were a couple of people on my team who are actually trained as Scrum Masters. Sorry, apologies. Scrum Masters, which was really, really helpful. But we needed somebody from the outside to coach us through a lot of it because that outsider didn't have the emotion, right? So that was really important to us. Is they're not involved in the way it used to be, and they could say, hey, this isn't working for me because, right? And they really felt that they could talk to an outsider more freely. I hadn't yet built their trust. That takes time. So, but they could talk with Stacy. The next thing we did was a conceptual introduction. So we got the entire team together, which does not happen very often. It hasn't happened since. It happened one time last summer, a year ago. We got the entire team together and we did a conceptual introduction. So we had to tell them about Agile. We had to tell them about Scrum. And they all thought we were absolutely crazy. this is a software development thing. How's this going to work? But that's okay. We at least we gave them the overview, and Stacy did so virtually. So the next thing we did, and I'm working on the clicker here. Ooh. Is we came up with some team principles. Now you'll see some similarities to the Agile Manifesto, but we had a couple things that we had to do. One, we had to level set the expectation of how the team was going to behave, and we had a couple of behaviors that we had to call out that specifically couldn't happen anymore. We had some passive-aggressive behavior on our team, and so we had to address that within the confines of some principles, and we revisit these principles every time we meet as a group. So I just want to kind of give you a taste of what the principles look like. We got all of our leaders together in person, and I felt like that was really important, is to get the leaders together to bond, to understand what they were going to do and how we were going to roll this out. Now, again, the leaders got there. We went through some scenarios. We tried a project that was not software development. All right, so if you're going to practice Agile in a non-software development project, you got to try it as leaders. You got to continuously practice it that way. And they struggled, to be totally honest, but we kept moving. Anybody that tells you that this is easy is wrong, all right? This is not easy, but persistence was key. And then the final round was a 3-part immersive Agile training, and that we did entirely remotely. And so we had video, we had sort of WebEx, and we had persistent chat. And that's the way that we did our breakout sessions. People tackled problems in chat sessions. We did readouts, all the things that you would do in little breakout teams in a room, we did in virtual breakout sessions. Again, a lot of hesitation from the team because they couldn't figure out how to apply it. But then we went through a pilot, and the pilot was really where we started to learn. The thing that helped us continue the rollout was what we call huddles. So you could almost call it a retrospective. Our retrospective, I think, is a slightly more negative, so we decided to call ours huddles. And so within the team huddle, we do these quarterly. We recognize people's Agile accomplishments. So it doesn't have to be necessarily, hey, I performed this many sprints and this many retrospectives and that kind of thing. We talk about the behaviors that people exhibited that adhere to the Agile principles. So we are constantly talking about it. If people want to be recognized on the team, they're recognized through Agile behaviors. The next thing we did is we had an Agile advocate on the team. So my job is global. I spend a lot of time traveling. I don't have a lot of time to be the cheerleader for Agile, someone who's constantly reminded. So we had an advocate on the team who's very familiar with Scrum, Agile, and is able to consistently cheer people on and let me know, because he had his eye on the team, let me know when people are doing things that were very Agile-oriented so that we could call them out. And then finally, a lot of re-education. So you can't just educate once, you can't educate twice, you have to educate over and over and over and over again. And then we have new people come on the team. Now we don't necessarily put them through formal training, we've got all the recordings and that kind of thing, but we have them do is, they're under the wing of another team member, and when a team member teaches Agile, it reinforces the Agile behaviors, right? So lots and lots of continuous training. So that's how we kept it going and how we rolled it out. And it took us, I would say it took us a good 8 months before I felt like we actually, we had a solid beginning, a really solid beginning, like I think people are getting it now. The other thing that it gave us, by the way, is a common language. We talk in different terms now. So we talk in terms of daily stand-ups. Not every project on our team is done with an Agile methodology, because some of them simply can't be done that way, but the vast majority of them are. But we do daily stand-ups for a lot of our projects. We do every other day for some projects. But the key thing is we talk in terms of stand-ups. We meet frequently. We also have some teams that meet virtually in a stand-up. So they say, hey, okay, look, we are in such diverse time zones and they don't overlap well enough that we're all going to put our updates in the Spark room between these hours so that the next group of folks can take over. So that's another way that we do it. The demos were huge. So all those comments about, I don't know what your team is doing, they go back into a black hole. Anytime that they make progress on a project, it doesn't matter what type of project it is. Anytime they run through a sprint, they go back to the customers that are engaged, and they go to a lot of our SE directors, our systems engineering directors. They go to anybody in the company who has a vested interest, and they show them what we've done. and which has been incredible for reducing the amount of duplication of effort in our company. We have multiple people running the same thing. In a big company, you get that kind of thing. It's crazy. So it massively reduced the duplication of effort, and everyone knows what our team is doing, and they also know the people. So it used to be that only the director went out and talked about what the team does. Now the team goes and talks about what they're doing, and they have ownership and recognition in the organization for the work that they're doing, which is absolutely amazing. And we do a lot of celebrations, right? So we celebrate the successes of the team. So when you've got a team that's virtual, really, really important that we do constant shout outs and celebrations of each other on the team. The other thing that's not necessarily part of Agile, but something that we do that very frequently is a thing I call sparring. So as a mechanism for encouraging new ideas and making sure that people understand that they have a voice, we will throw out a problem, or we'll throw out a statement, here's what's happening, or here's what I'm planning to do. Tell me why that's a bad idea. Tell me why that's a good idea. And we openly identify new ways, or we openly identify, hey, this, and this can happen when this situation. How would we mitigate it? It's not oh, that's a bad idea because the sky's going to fall. It's hey, here are the challenges that we can encounter, so how are we going to solve them? So we spar in a very positive way, and that's something that I introduced to the team as well. We had some things that didn't go so well. When we implemented Agile and Scrum, we decided we were going to implement it through a project management tool. Now, we had a legacy project management tool that we tried to modify into sort of a Kanban board. And this thing just turned into a complete nightmare. It was a disaster. And everybody was so focused on updating the tool and making sure that it had all the right information. And they're like, basically what they told me is, look, we're updating this tool for you, not for me. And I'm like, well, then we killed the tool. So we killed the tool. All right. Okay, that had a negative consequence in itself, documentation. Okay, so I love the concept of working product over documentation, over comprehensive documentation. As an executive, though, I have a problem that when other people want to know what my team's doing, I actually really don't have any documentation. So I can kind of tell you what's happening. We've kind of met in the middle, so each of my team gives me a one-page PowerPoint slide. We review it quarterly with my boss so he can see exactly what's happening. But what we do is, here's everything that happened in the last quarter. So we can take a look back and understand the accomplishments. Then we look 3 quarters out. Next quarter is actually pretty detailed with what's actually prioritized in the backlog. And then the user stories get a little thinner and thinner, and we don't have necessarily, this is kind of about what we think is going to happen, but it's more of a, and then something good will happen over here. We know that we don't have it all worked out, right? But we have a better piece of documentation. But the lack of documentation, I'll tell you, not from the individual contributor perspective, but from an executive perspective, is a bit of a challenge for me. And it's also because now I'm not in a product development environment, right? I'm in a sales environment, and the number of people who bring projects to me that are all PowerPoint is huge, right? So my team focuses on functionality over PowerPoint. I have a guy, I've got him, this other team, I've asked them to come up with an assessment system. Help me understand the competency of the people in my team, right? The technical competency of the people in my team. And I don't want you to test them all day. I want you to look at what they do in the network and tell me from that what they're good at, right? It shouldn't be that hard. And so he comes back to me with the name. He's got with acronyms and all these cool slides. I'm like, that's awesome, but what did you do? So I'm from Missouri, the show me state. What did you do? So we focus probably to a fault on what we did than some documentation. So just a little caveat, when you're working with executives, that's been a challenge that I've had there. Some challenges, I'm not going to call them failures. Documentation has been an issue, but I'm going to call these challenges. Breaking up projects into small pieces. We have a lot of folks that can't comprehend actually breaking things up into sprints, breaking things up into user stories, and prioritizing prioritizing their work. They can only see the full beginning to end and this monolithic thing. That has been a big challenge for us. And so it's something that we have to sit down and help them with. It's not that it can't be overcome. It's a matter of sitting down and helping them understand how to chunk up the work. The other one is minimum viable product. This is very, very similar to the previous issue. I only see the big, I don't see the small. So they say, well, I can't release it until it's fully baked. And I said, well, tell me what would happen if we released it when it was this much baked? What is anybody going to die? Are we going to lose money? Right? So what's going to happen? Now, I had a bad thing happen with this. Now, I told you we make a lot of mistakes. I tell people we make a lot of mistakes, but we move a whole lot faster than other people. So we actually are working on building a tool. My team isn't developing it. We're influencing someone else to build it. But we have the same problem you all have. Our systems engineers spend no, it's not right. I've got it wrong. It's something like 8% of their time. It's 8% of their time. 8 hours a week, that's what it is, sorry. 8 hours a week searching for stuff. 8 hours, they spend an entire day a week searching for things. And I just think that's kind of crazy. I think, well, there should be an answer to that. So we've got a group that's building a Q&A tool, ask a question, get an answer. That's what they're searching for something because they have a question. Just ask the question and give me an answer. So that's what we're building right now. We actually have a functional prototype. It's kind of cool. We handed it over to another team that doesn't do sales. We handed it over to our TAC team because our idea is that we want to expand this and something that everybody can use. They asked every other question, right? So we're asking how you sell stuff, and they're like, how do you recover the password? I'm like, whoa, we haven't taught us to do that yet. So immediately what they started doing was like, well, let's have a meeting. We're going to do a post-mortem on this tool. And I'm like, time out. I didn't set the proper expectations of this tool that we've, it was either the product wasn't minimally viable for this group, or I didn't set the proper expectations. So we've had some challenges around that, but it's with open dialogue, we're working through those with other teams. And then finally, this one is really interesting, especially for the non-software developers. So that my team, I said, has 50 projects. I have worked very, very hard over the last year to cut those down, and cut and cut and cut. I think we're probably down to the 25 range, but I continue to cut. Each one of these people has multiple issues. So the concept of multiple projects, right? I'm doing multiple things. That means I can't, when I focus on a sprint, how do I just focus on one thing? So we've had to redefine the concept of a sprint. Can you spend every morning this week doing this and every afternoon this week doing this? Or can you just carve off 2 days? Your sprints are 2 days instead of 2 weeks, right? So we have to be very flexible in how we approach this so that they can handle multiple things, but we're still able to operate under the spirit of Scrum and Agile. So a few things that have happened, and I told you a little bit about what happened when we turned this tool over to the TAC organization, and it didn't answer any of their questions. So working with non-Agile teams is a very interesting challenge for us, because now we have, my team has a whole set of vocabulary that we use, and we use it we talk about customer demos, we talk about retrospectives, right? So we talk in a specific vocabulary. So now when we talk with non-technical teams, we have to teach them our vocabulary. And so having a small team, a lot of other people do our work. We manage it, they do some of the work, right, and they have input into it, so we have to teach them our vocabulary. But in particular, I wanted to share with you something that's happening between Cisco product development and Cisco sales. I was in Canada a few weeks ago, and one of senior directors in systems engineering said, oh, those product people, they blame everything on Agile, they won't show me the roadmap, and they hide behind Agile so that they don't have to commit to anything. I was like, well, that's really interesting. So having read the book, I said, well, have you ever learned how they speak? Have you ever asked them how they do things, why they can't? And he just looked at me like I was crazy. I said, have you talked to them about their backlog and how they prioritize their backlog? And he said, I'd never considered that. So when you're he's like, I'm sales, I'm king. So, no. They control the product. If you want to sell, they've got the product. So teaching others Agile terminology is really important, because otherwise you get blamed for a lot of things because they're still thinking the old way. They still want a roadmap. So The other thing I can tell you is I understand the value of being able to prioritize features in real time, or in near real time, right, between sprints. That's very important. So if you can explain that to the folks around you and help them understand that, but also give them the vision. All right, if the salespeople had the ultimate vision for the next 6 months, regardless of the roadmap, so you can say, hey, here's what we want it to do in general. They can sell a vision. Salespeople can sell a vision. They don't have to sell specific features necessarily. They can sell a vision. So if you can say, hey, this is where I think my product's going to go, that would help them dramatically. And then the other one is continuous feedback. This has been critical, not only for the implementation of Agile, but in general. Anytime that your customer gives you product requirements, so my customers, 6,000 systems engineers, you have different customers, right? But they're giving you product requirements, they're talking to you. Telling them exactly what you prioritized in the next sprint and why is critical. Otherwise, they cut off the communication, right? We told them what we wanted, and then they didn't do anything with the information. So you've got to close the feedback. So I told you that I have some rules for my team. And this is one of the rules I have, and it's not necessarily Agile, but I tell my team, look, you're never allowed to ask the systems engineering organization a question unless you tell them the reply and what you're doing about it. So this has cut surveys way down, by the way. So we have a few rules around surveys, but this is critical. Otherwise, you lose trust, and they just cut off the communication, and it's very detrimental to the team. The other thing that's happened with Agile is my team has started moving very fast. We execute incredibly rapidly now because we have this methodology, and I know you've all seen it in development, right? So we move fast. And so if people describe my team, that's one of the things they'll tell you. And somebody told me the other day, that we're so much further out than another group at Cisco, which is a detriment into itself, because I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, if you get too far out in front of your troops, you start to look like the enemy. This is a problem. This is a real problem for us, that we start to look like the enemy because we're innovating faster than other teams. So we have to bring people along with us, and that's that communication. Anyone who's a stakeholder has to be with us in our sprint reviews. They're with us. They are also customers. So anyone that has a parallel process, they're all in our sprint reviews. They are all in our communications. They go with us, and anything that we create is our product, not my team's product. And that's one of the ways that we're minimizing this, but it is a problem if you start moving faster than the folks around you. So I wanted to leave time, and I broke my watch, so I actually it's not charged. I have 10 minutes. Awesome, that's perfect. Okay, so I wanted to open it up for questions. So that's kind of my team's journey. I just wanted to share with you, like I said, you're all more experts in Agile than I am, so I think we got a question here. Yes.
Following some Agile. The question is about that you are rewarding your team members for practicing some Agile principles or rules or something. So how does that impact the overall morale of the team?
The way how does it impact the overall team? I have a small team. So with 20 people, in 90 minutes, you can actually recognize all of them in a way. So what we do is we talk about the work that everyone's doing and the impact they've had over the last quarter. But we do have a spotlight. I don't believe in, we're virtual. I don't give awards. I don't have plaques, right? We talk, people just want to hear themselves talked about, right? It's basic, right? Yeah. So we highlight specific Agile behaviors in a call out. So while we talk about every individual's work, if someone's doing something really, really well, we have a highlight. We just talk about that person with their picture and talk about the specific Agile principles that they were implementing in their work that quarter. But yeah, there aren't any trophies or anything like that. I think there's one here and here.
You talked about running multiple projects in parallel when you started.
Yes.
Is your team still doing that?
Multiple projects in parallel. Yes, my team is still doing that. I have attempted to whittle that down a little bit, but interesting thing, so you got a team of 20 people with right now about 25 projects. When you look at the way Agile was meant to be done, it's a small group of people working sort of on a single project, right? So I have one person with ownership over multiple products. So now that I've cut them way down, I've freed up some time for my team so that they can now help each other, but each one has priorities over a specific amount of time. So the way that we've been able to address that is to help them understand who they have access to on the team to help them with their project, and then help them identify the sprint cycles that'll work the best for their project. And we openly talk about, so if someone's running a sprint in the mornings of 1 week, and then they're working with somebody, let's say they're in the US and they're working with somebody in the UK, they might work the same sprint in the afternoons that week just so they can accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. It does require a lot of extra planning, mostly because of the time zone differences and because we're juggling multiple projects, but we've been pretty successful in it. So, but the whole concept of focusing only on one problem at a time is a new one for most teams. And that gives them a significant boost in productivity and a lot of freedom to be creative in that project at that time. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So I've had a similar problem being compensated, not being so productive in such context.
Yeah, so nobody multitasks, right? They rapidly serial task. And so the idea is that carve out time, a consistent time to work on just that one problem, and they're far more productive. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if it's feasible in your organization, but have you thought about organizing around value rather than project? And do you have to organize around specific product, or could you organize around solutions?
Okay, let me make sure I understand. So value instead of project. I'll tell you, and organize around solutions instead of product, correct? Is that what you're saying? So it's interesting. What I've done over time is essentially divest our team of anything that someone else can do. So our team used to run compensation. So with a team of, or a sales organization of 20,000 people and only 6,000 are SEs, there's a compensation team. But my team was also doing compensation. So I said, well, we're not doing that anymore. There's a team to do that. They can, so I cut out all the things that I didn't think added value. And now what we do is we source problems from the systems engineering organization. So one of our issues right now is quality. And we're trying to understand, what does that mean? Our systems engineers are spending a great deal of time in post-sales, and they need to be selling. So why are they spending time in post-sales? And so I've got a group of folks that are actually doing research with the teams, analyzing what's happening. And what we're discovering is that our pre-sales engineers are spending a lot of time with our customers who have problems in their network that have already been resolved, right? So okay, now we need to create a mechanism for software adoption, because our software's we had a quality blip, and then it's actually really interesting to see it happen around the globe. There's a huge delay. It just follows the sun in a way. So we focus on the things that we think are most impactful to the organization, and have cut everything that I think is low impact and can be done by someone else. Now, I don't know if I addressed it the way that you were thinking of, though, so I might have to ask you for more examples.
Well, again, I don't know. It sounds like you're doing projects or products, and we think about the concept of minimum viable.
Oh.
So could you do certain features of a project or a product and work on a feature level rather than focusing on a product?
Absolutely. So we do some of that, some feature type level where we have influence. So what we do, so rather than developing an entire product or an entire solution, we identify a gap maybe in a product or a process that's happening at Cisco, and we organize around going and addressing that one component that someone else is running, and then we pull back. My goal is to have, I can't necessarily specify an end date, but all of my team needs to know that there is a way out of every project we do. I don't want to hold on to anything in perpetuity. That is a waste of time, right? So where can we innovate and then back out of the process again? So I think that's kind of what you're talking about, working on a feature and backing out. So we are developing a couple of tools on my team, this Q&A tool that we got somebody else developing, but we have a plan of exit, right? We're going to get to a minimum viable product, and we already know which team's going to take it over. We're going to hand it over. We're going to tackle the next problem. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi there. Thank you very much. This has been absolutely fascinating. Great to hear. So I want to go back to something you were talking about related to values. Mm-hmm. And just to let you know kind of where I'm coming from, I work as a coach and am and I think of Agile as a values framework, and within that, Scrum, the most popular Agile framework, is largely encapsulates the tools and also some of the thinking tools and the value, and there are values. But what I want to ask you about is, since you're doing an Agile approach outside of conventional, the conventional realm of software development, where most of us are familiar, I want you to go back and touch a bit on how you use Agile values as a frame of reference for your process modifications when you're not doing something that's conventionally Scrum or XP or Crystal or whatever. How do you know that you're still Agile in spirit?
I go back to things like customer demos. Is the customer with you along the way? Is the customer so I try to go back to the idea of, are you delivering value quickly? Is the customer with you along the way? Are you spending all of your time in PowerPoint? Right? So it doesn't have to be an actual product or a huge process. I can ask the questions, did somebody give you a problem and you shut the door on everyone and tried to solve it yourself? Or did somebody give you a problem and you opened the door to solicit ideas, right? So that's kind of where I go back to the Agile framework or the Agile principles is customer demo. Hey, I had this idea. Before you implement it, before you go build something, take your idea back to the customer. What did they say? And of course, our customer is internal, but that's kind of how we implement it that way. Does that make sense? Yeah.
With that, I think we've maxed out our time.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you.
That was
I
awesome.
appreciate it. Appreciate it.